Hi everyone, so I'm just going to do a little bit of reading with you. I might ask you some questions, I might not. So if I ask you a question, make sure you pause the video and try and answer it, and then unpause the video just like we would with phonics. So I've got this book today. Can anybody tell me who the author is? Yep, the author is Roald Dahl. And what is the title of the book? That's right, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, who can remind me what the writing's called on the back? It's a blurb, and I'm going to read that blurb to you now. Charlie Bucket can't believe his luck when he finds a golden ticket and wins the chance of a lifetime. A magical day witnessing the miraculous creation of the most delectable eatables ever made. Okay, so I want you now just to tell somebody, if you haven't read this story before, what you think is going to happen. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll read each page and then I'll show you the pictures on those pages. So chapter 1, Here Comes Charlie. These two very old people are the father and mother of Mr. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine. And these two very old people are the father and mother of Mrs. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa George and Grandpa Georgina and Grandma Georgina. This is Mr. Bucket and this is Mrs. Bucket. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket have a small boy whose name is Charlie Bucket. This is Charlie. How do you do? And how do you do? And how do you do again? He's pleased to meet you. The whole of this family, the 6 grown-ups, count them, and little Charlie Bucket live together in a small wooden house on the edge of a great town. The house wasn't nearly large enough for so many people, and life was extremely uncomfortable for them all. There were only 2 rooms in the place altogether. There were only 1 bed. The bed was given to the 4 old grandparents because they were so old and tired. They were so tired, they never got out of it. Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine on this side, Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina on the other side. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket and little Charlie Bucket slept in the other room upon a mattress on the floor. In the summertime, this wasn't too bad, but in the winter, freezing cold draughts blew through across the floor all night long, and it was awful. There wasn't any question of them being able to buy a better house, or even one more bed to sleep in. They were far too poor for that. Mr. Bucket was the only person in the family with a job. He worked in a toothpaste factory where he sat all day long at a bench and screwed the little caps onto the tops of the tubes of the toothpaste after the tubes had been filled. But a toothpaste cap screwer is never paid very much money. And poor Mr. Bucket, however hard he worked and however fast he screwed on the caps, was never able to make enough to buy one half of the things that such a large family needed. There wasn't even enough money to buy proper food for them all. The only meals they could afford were bread and margarine for breakfast, boiled potatoes and cabbage for lunch, and cabbage soup for supper. Some days were a bit better. They all looked forward to Sundays because then, although they had exactly the same, everyone was allowed a second helping. The Buckets, of course, didn't starve, but every one of them, the 2 old grandfathers, the 2 old grandmothers, Charlie's father, Charlie's mother, and especially little Charlie himself, went about from morning till night with a horribly empty feeling in their tummies. Charlie felt it worst of all, and although his father and mother often went without their own share of lunch or supper so that they could give it to him, it wasn't nearly enough for a growing boy. He desperately wanted something more filling and satisfying than cabbage and cabbage soup. The one thing he longed for more than anything else was What do you think it might be? Of course, it's chocolate. Walking to school in the mornings, Charlie could see great slabs of chocolate piled up high in the shop windows, and he would stop and stare, and with pressed nose against the glass, his mouth watered like mad. Many times a day he would see other children taking bars of creamy chocolate out of their pockets and munching them greedily. And that, of course, was pure torture. Only once a year on his birthday did Charlie Bucket ever get to taste a bit of chocolate. The whole family saved up their money for that special occasion. And when that great day arrived, Charlie was always presented with one small chocolate bar to eat by himself. And each time he received it on those marvellous birthday mornings, he would place it carefully in a small wooden box that he owned and treasure it as though it were a bar of solid gold. And for the next few days he would allow himself only to look at it, but never to touch it. Then at last, when he could stand it no longer, he would peel back a tiny bit of the paper at one corner to expose a tiny bit of chocolate, and that he would take a tiny nibble, just enough to allow the lovely sweet taste to spread out slowly over his tongue. The next day he would take another tiny nibble, and so on, and so on. And in this way, Charlie would make his 6-penny bar of birthday chocolate last him for more than a month. I bet you couldn't do that at home. Can you make a chocolate bar last more than a month? I wonder. But I haven't yet told you about the one awful thing that tortured little Charlie, the lover of chocolate more than anything else. This thing for him was far worse than seeing slabs of chocolate in the shop windows, or watching other children munching bars of creamy chocolate right in front of him. It was the most terrible, torturing thing you could imagine, and it was this. In the town itself, actually within sight of the house in which Charlie lived, there was an enormous chocolate factory. Just imagine that. And it was simply an ordinary, enormous chocolate factory either. It was the largest and most famous in the whole world. It was Wonka's factory, owned by a man called Mr. Willy Wonka, the greatest inventor and maker of chocolates that there has ever been. And what a tremendous, marvellous place it was. It had huge iron gates leading into it, and a high wall surrounding it, and smoke belching from its chimneys, and strange whizzing sounds coming from deep inside it, and outside the walls, for half a mile around it in every direction. The air was scented with the heavy, rich smell of melting chocolate. Twice a day, on his way to and from school, little Charlie Bucket had to walk right past the gates of the factory. And every time he went by, he would begin to walk very, very slowly, and he would hold his nose in the air and take long, deep sniffs of the gorgeous chocolatey smell all around him. Oh, how he loved that smell, and how he wished he could go inside the factory and see what it was like. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for today, and I'm going to set you a couple of challenges. I want you to get a chocolate bar, maybe it's a Easter egg that you've got left over or just a normal chocolate bar, and I want you to have little tiny pieces each day and see how long you can make it last. That's your first challenge. Challenge number 2, I would like you to draw me a picture of what you think it would look like inside the chocolate factory. Now, if you've already read this book or you've already seen the film, I want you to draw a picture of what you would have liked it to have looked like, what you imagine it to look like in your head, not what you've already seen. Okay? I hope you've enjoyed reading, and we'll read chapter 2 tomorrow. Bye!